So my guest today is Sean O'Keefe, an award-winning professor at Santa Clara University and the founder and partner of Career Launch, a mission-driven social enterprise that partners with colleges to equitably scale students' abilities to create professional relationships and launch effective job or internship searches in the hidden job market, especially for students with few to no employment connections. By the way, folks, in case you haven't noticed, he is a professor. That was one long sentence that was perfectly correct grammatically. He recently published a 5-star book called Launch Your Career: How Any Student Can Create Relationships with Professionals and Land the Jobs and Internships They Want. Sean, welcome. Thanks for making time today.
Hey, so glad to be here with you, Jeff. It is my pleasure.
Thank you. So you spoke about the hidden job market. And I'm always curious, like, hidden job market, where is it hiding? How do people find where it's hiding so they can expose it to the light of air?
Yeah, so I found this out junior year in college. Right out of high school, I went to community college, and then I transferred to a public university. My junior year, I'm sitting in class. I majored in communication. I minored in sports management. I had this professor in sports management said, "Hey class, who here would like to have a paid internship this summer with a professional sports team?" Well, you can imagine every hand went up, right? And then he had 3 classes of 60 students, and he had 5 internships to hand out through connections that he had. And he said, "The only fair way I know how to hand out these internships is to the students with the best grades." Well, my head went down, my shoulders shrunk. I was not one of the students with the best grade. But he went on to say, if you consider yourself a hard worker and you want to zig when others zag, 80% of jobs are in what's called the hidden job market, meaning they're never posted on LinkedIn or careerbuilder.com or indeed.com. If you add up all those job sites, that's only 20% of all jobs and internships. The rest are found through relationships and connections. And so he said, if you don't come from a family or a community or a background where you have connections, you're not doomed. You can create them from scratch. So if you can, but it's going to take a lot of hard work. But if you're one of those, if you feel like you're one of those students, then come to my office hours. So I did. I had a paper route when I was in middle school, waking up at 4:30 in the morning, to deliver newspapers, and then had jobs and played sports in high school. I wasn't afraid of hard work. I just wasn't a great student. Long story short.
I want to translate for the audience. Newspapers, that's antique, MSNBC, and CNN.com. Sorry, please continue.
Yes. So I showed up at the office hours. I would say, hey, so what do I need to do? I'd love to get an internship with a professional sports team. And over the course of several interactions and several stops by the office, he taught me to zig when others zag and proactively identify the organizations that I wanted to work for. In my case, it was professional sports team. But over the last 11 years of teaching the Career Launch method, which is in the book that you pointed out at the top, students with interest in any industry, students at 2-year schools, students at 4-year schools, students in master's programs can use a step-by-step process that we now call the Career Launch method that I clumsily did myself 20 years ago because of this professor that I had. And I ended up getting 3 internships with the San Francisco 49ers, the Oakland A's, and the San Francisco Giants. And those 3 internships led to a full-time job after graduation. 2 of the 3 internships were in the hidden job market. They were never posted online. And one of the internships, the woman created because she was positively impacted and impressed by my proactive outreach to build relationships and inquire about careers and inquire about her path and what it would do, what it would take to get an internship. So she created one for me. And so I got a full-time job with the Oakland A's after graduation. And as I went through my early and mid 20s, I realized in talking with friends and coworkers and clients, et cetera, man, I was really lucky to get the advice from this one professor at my undergraduate studies. So I went back to school to get my MBA, 25 through 28 years old. And during that time, I had a conversation with the dean, and I expressed my gratitude for this undergraduate professor I had to get my dream job. And I said, I really want to pay it forward somehow one day. And later on, he said, well, Sean, how would you like to become a professor and teach as an adjunct? So I did that. And that led to me teaching in the business school. And then the woman who runs our first generation college student program at our university said, hey, hearing great things about this class you're teaching. Can you teach a class for first generation engineering, first generation humanities and arts and science students? And I said, yes, as a professor, that's the biggest compliment you can get is, will you design and teach a class? So I said yes to that. And then 2 years after teaching that class, I think 2017, 2018, the woman who runs the program, Erin Kamara Walsh, she said, I think, John, you got to figure out a way to bring this to the world. This curriculum is not being taught, and it's having an incredible impact on students. So that led to having conversations with other professors and being offered to write a book. And then also our university investing in our social enterprise called Career Launch, where we provide co-curricular services to other colleges and universities. We have this 28-day micro-learning program where students can get 10 minutes of video a day for 28 days to learn this method instead of reading a 200-page book.
Excellent. So using yourself as the model here, back in the day when you were the student, how did you find those jobs, those internships that were hidden? What did you do back then? And then we're going to talk about how it's upgraded for today.
Yeah, sure. Well, step one is just make a list of the organizations that I wanted to work for. Step two was to identify the right people at the organization. So I didn't get the best grades, wasn't a 4.0 student, but I was smart enough to realize that CEOs, CFOs, and a lot of times at bigger companies, vice presidents, they're probably, one, going to be harder to get them, have a conversation with. And number two is they probably also don't hire interns or recent college grads. And of course, a 22-year-old, 23-year-old, someone right out of college, they're also probably not someone that has authority to hire interns or recent college grads. But a lot of times at mid-sized organizations and larger organizations, mid-level management, those are the people who usually, and to paint things with a broad stroke here, those are the people that hire interns and recent college grads. So I just made a list of 30 people. So the 5 major Bay Area sports teams here in Northern California, I made a list of the director of marketing, the director of operations, the director of finance, the director of blank. And I just put everyone into a Microsoft Excel sheet back in the day and figured out what their email address was. Sometimes it was on their website and sometimes it wasn't. Sometimes I just had to guess. There was no LinkedIn, there was no email finding tools like there are nowadays. And then I just mixed up phone calls with emails, and it was scary, especially the phone calls. I remember being in my dorm room, having to get out of my chair. I was so nervous. I couldn't even sit down and make the call. I was like, I'm calling these people who have like my dream job. And so I tried to make myself sound as mature as possible. And I was freaking out on the inside, but anyways, that outreach, I kind of, did, something each week. And sometimes people would tell me, hey, call back next week, call back next month, never call me again, or you need to talk to HR, you need to do this. But unless I got a hard no, I would use professional persistence and politely figure out ways I could circle back without saying the same thing every time. And after a couple months of doing that with 30 different people, I got my first person to saying yes to taking a conversation, and that conversation led to an internship.
Folks, I want you to catch what he said there. I'm going to ask him to repeat it. How long did it take for you calling those 30 people to get your first conversation?
2 months.
2 months. So if you think it's one and done, one phone call, and they're suddenly going to go, yes, this is the woman, this is the man of my dreams. Don't kid yourself. Like dating, it takes time to fall in love. And they don't even know if they want to go out with you. So just recognize that professional persistence is a term that he used to describe his own efforts in order to get the foot in the door. And how would you do it differently now? And then we're going to go into the actual conversations that you had.
Yeah, so I brought this to the classroom. So I started teaching as an adjunct in January of 2010. And every class I've taught since then, and now I'm a non-tenure track faculty, and since 2016. So I teach much more frequently than I was back then. Every class, I have students have to complete a career conversation assignment. For the last 30 years, a lot of career centers and higher ed folks use the term informational interview. We found through research that changing the terminology from informational interview to career conversation has two major impacts. One, for the student, it reduces anxiety. It's much more easy to think about doing a career conversation, just having a conversation, versus that word interview trips, kind of automatically induces some anxiety in students. And then on the other side of the coin, from the professionals, in our data, once we made the change, the ratio of getting a yes when students reach out is higher from the professionals. So the professionals like the terminology better too. It sits better with them too. So nowadays, after teaching this in the classroom for 11 years, in the last 3 years with college students across the country, through our partnerships, through our social enterprise, we've created a formula that's in the book that takes this systematic approach and reduces it down in 8 steps with a bunch of micro steps. And in step 4 of the method is how to do the outreach. So we've tried all different things. Like what I did 20 years ago was, it took 2 months, like you said, you pointed out to the audience, it took 2 months to get that first conversation. We've tried so many different things over the last 11 years. Now students, once they do the preparation for the first 3 steps of the method, when they get to step 4 and they use the templates that we have, they're getting their first conversation within the first week. Most of the time, not every time, but I would say over 50% of the students are setting up their first career conversation within a week of going through the method.
Nothing works every time, folks, but if you do enough of the right things, you get great results. And like Sean said, you wind up with interviews a lot sooner than what he did back when dinosaurs roamed the earth. So the following steps to get them in the door. You want to share what that step number 4 is?
Yes. So we break down step 4, which is outreach, into warm networking and cold networking. And warm networking is utilizing any existing relationships, and cold networking is the rest of the world of people you don't know and you have no connection to. I made the mistake when I was in college that I assumed I definitely knew I didn't know anyone who worked in professional sports, but I assumed no one in my family knew anyone who worked in professional sports. So let me share this with you, because this is really important and this could pay off quickly for a lot of folks. When I was 29, I'm at Easter Sunday, sitting on the couch having a beer with my uncle, and we're watching the San Francisco Giants play baseball. And I'm working for the Oakland A's at this point. I hustled during college to get those internships. I'm working full time for the Oakland A's. And he says, hey, you should meet my buddy who works for the San Francisco Giants. And I'm like, Uncle Bill, you have a friend who works for the Giants? Why didn't you tell me that like 10 years ago? Here's the mistake I made. I just prejudged my uncle. My uncle didn't go to college. He started working full time, right after high school. And I just assumed he didn't have any connections in professional sports. But here's the question I want you to write down or remember. And this is the question. Man, I just drew a blank. The question is, you don't happen to know anybody who blank, do you? You don't happen to know anyone who blank, do you? So if I would have said during college to my uncle, you don't happen to know anyone who works in professional sports, do you? He would have said, yes, I do. I've been bowling with, I bowl in a league with this gentleman who works for the San Francisco Giants. But I didn't ask that question. So over the last couple of years, we've started implementing this into our curriculum. And students, as you can imagine, you don't know what you don't know. And if you talk to 50 people over the course of a year and you ask all 50 people, you don't happen to know anyone who works in finance, do you? You don't happen to know anyone who works in engineering, do you? You don't happen to know anyone who's a nurse, do you? Like whatever you're interested in getting into, at some point you're bound to run into someone who says, yeah, I have a neighbor, I have a daughter, I have a mom. Like it's magic. You don't happen to know anyone who blank, do you? And so that is a great way to tap into the warm network side of things. In the book, we focus on the cold networking that we really like to call proactive strategic networking, because there's a lot of power in being intentional and strategic. So step one of the method is write down 10 organizations you might want to work for. Companies, nonprofits, higher education, like whatever industry you're trying to get into, just write down 10 organizations. Step two is identify 5 people at 5 of those organizations. So you come up with a list of 25 strategic contacts. I mentioned step 4 is outreach, and we're going to get into that in a little bit. Before you start your outreach though, if you're a student, on your student email address, create an email signature. Your name, what's your major or your minor. If you're part of a student club, put that there too. Obviously the name of your university, and then have a LinkedIn URL to your LinkedIn profile also in your email signature. Why? So it's really important when we teach and coach college students the psychology of the professional. If you're going, and this doesn't just apply to college students. The book can apply to anyone in any walk of life. But as a college professor, we wrote this for the student audience. But if you're going to reach out to someone you never met, the first thing they want to know is that you are who you say you are. So how can you make someone feel comfortable? Well, in your email, which if you're a student, it should come from your .edu address, right? Or if you happen to be a high school student and wants to do this, your school email address. And then you have the email signature and your LinkedIn URL. And it doesn't have to be the perfect LinkedIn. At least for the purpose of this, you want to have the professional be able to click on something that's a third party and verify that you are who you say you are. And just doing that greatly increases the rate of getting a yes. All right, so to answer your question more directly on step 4, the outreach. So we've found that email, phone call, LinkedIn message, and then what we call a give up email is the right amount of professional persistence without coming close to being annoying or too aggressive. And now
Let me interrupt you there.
Sure.
With what space in between them?
Yeah. So when anyone finishes a list of top 25 strategic contacts, we tell them to pick 5 on whenever day 1 is of doing outreach. Pick 5 of the 25. Don't just do 1. Don't do all 25, but do 5, because you have to customize each and every email, and that takes a little bit of time and thought. And then once you press send, if you don't get a response from those 5, you're going to wait 2 business days. So weekends and holidays don't count. And then if you don't get a response, what Gen Z calls getting ghosted, you're going to send email number 2 2 business days later. And that's a different email, and it's much shorter. And if you continue to get ghosted, you're going to wait 2 more business days and make a phone call. Phone call doesn't work, you leave a voicemail and don't get a call back, you're going to wait 2 more days and send a LinkedIn message, and you're going to have to customize. And we have templates for all this in the book and through all of our methodologies or our resources. And then if that still doesn't work, and a lot of people are going to say yes during this process, but if that still doesn't work, the last thing you do is you wait 2 more days and you send what we call a give up email. You're signaling to the professional, you're stopping your outreach. It must, and you're going to provide a copy of your resume and say, please forward this to a resume or keep me in mind for future opportunities. And which is amazing about this give up email on day 9 of this method, business day 9, is that we've had several students who never got a response from the person that they reached out to, but the person did forward the resume on the last day, and we've had students get in interviews for full-time jobs and then get the job, and then after starting on day 1, they met the person who forwarded the resume onto a colleague.
It's amazing how that works, and I know from having worked in search, the give up type of message, the one that basically says, sorry for having wasted your time, wasn't trying to be annoying. It's like a classic thing in sales. I'm sorry, I'm such a poor salesperson. It's the last thing you say at the door in all these old-fashioned classic sales techniques. I'm sorry, I'm such a poor salesman that I couldn't persuade you to the merits of my product. Oh, you're not a bad salesperson, at which point the person turns around, goes back and sits down. It's the same thing that you're talking about, where you're basically saying, okay, I'm done. Here's my resume. If you know of something, please forward it. And they do. Not all the time,
Right.
but enough of the time. You're giving them something.
Yep.
One last thing where you're playing on their guilt.
Yeah.
It's great. So when they get in the door, what do they ask about?
Yeah, so in the 8 steps of the career launch method, steps 5 and 6 are preparation and advanced preparation. We want, you put a lot of effort into getting this career conversation. It's usually scheduled for 20 minutes is the right ask amount. And then it's like, okay, so what do you wear? What do when do you arrive? Whether it's on video chat or in person, there's different answers to that. How to make small talk, so you aren't just a robot firing off question after question. And then as far as the questions you ask, what should you prioritize if you only have 20 minutes that can fly by? So we cover all of that, in step 5 of the book. And then advanced preparation is step 6. And we specifically call out how to end the conversation with a mutually agreed upon next step. Because different students or different job seekers have different goals of these informal career conversations. Some are doing it just to discern and learn vicariously because they're maybe they're not trying to get a job or an internship right now. They're just trying to figure out what they want to do with their life. And they want to learn vicariously from professionals and get an idea of which different paths they can choose with their different interests. So we have templates and suggestions on how to end that type of conversation. But if a student or a job seeker wants to turn that informal career conversation into a formal interview, how do you do that transition? So we have a 4-question sequence that is magic. I mean, I don't think it's overstating. It's amazing how many students have taken this 4-question sequence. And here it goes. And you can't do this at the beginning of the career conversation because you would sound disingenuous because you asked to learn about the person's career. But if you ask it at the end, it's totally acceptable, and the professional's expecting that you pick that person for a reason. So obviously, you're probably interested in their career and/or their company and possibly working there. So the first question is, what characteristics do you look for in the ideal intern, ideal recent college grad, ideal blank? And when you ask that question, they're going to give you the answers to the test. And so you listen, you maybe take some notes or mental notes. And then the second question of the 4 is, thanks for sharing. Would it be okay if I told you a little bit more about myself? And then over the next 1 to 2 minutes, everything that they mentioned about the ideal candidate that's true about yourself, you share that exactly. And then as you finish up that, then kind of the logical next question is, based on the little bit about me, do you think I'm someone that would be a good fit? And assuming that there was some match there, they're probably going to say yes.
Sure.
And then the last question is actually pretty easy. It just kind of goes with the flow. Well, what do you suggest as next steps, or who do you think I should talk to? And then you're off. You have a mutually agreed upon next step to get an interview. And sometimes it's like, well, we have nothing available right now, but we usually hire for these type of positions in September. Or, why don't you check back with me in 2 months? Or actually, this has happened for several students, not everyone. But you know what? We have a position open right now. Would you like to talk about that? Can we kind of transition into that? I think. And then we've had students on the career conversation, go way past the 20 minutes and then have it turn into an interview on the spot. And we've even have, Isaac Nablus is one of the stories in the book. Isaac got interviewed on the spot after the career conversation or during the career conversation. And before the interview was over, he had a verbal job offer for a full-time job after he graduated.
Fabulous. Absolutely fabulous. And I'll just simply say, I'm sure you talk with the students about behaviorally, not just the words, but how they're supposed to act during the interview as well. Could you speak to a little bit of that, please?
Yeah. So the goal is to make sure that the professional feels like it was worth their time, right? You reached out, there's a lot of this is done, cold networking, right? They did not know you before. So not only is, our students and job seekers representing themselves, but for students, they're representing their university. So it's really important that the professional feels good about it. And so, enthusiasm and posture and nonverbal language is things that we talk about in step 5 of the method during the preparation.
And folks, I'll simply say your energy level is important. Now, if you're up for a quantitative role, it's a different behavior than for a marketing role. and just recognize what it is the audience wants to know about you, not just simply your knowledge, but how you present yourself. What's the likelihood that a quant or someone entering quantitative work is going to need to be, hey, pretty small, right? But you'll learn that as you start reading the book. It is terrific, by the way, folks. So back in the day, you sent out emails and followed this process and didn't really work your personal network. And you spoke a little bit about asking people who you knew, who you wouldn't happen to know someone who. What else should people be doing in order to check in with their personal network or expand into the, actually, let's skip the personal network for now. Let's talk in terms of making the connections to, with people that they don't know, because that's going to be the statistical probability of where they're going to start having these conversations.
Yes. So step 7 of the method is effective follow-up and keeping the relationship alive. So we don't want these career conversations to be a transaction, meaning you meet someone for 20 minutes, maybe it goes 30 minutes, and then you never talk to the person again for the rest of your life. That's what we don't want. And so, but it takes some effort to cultivate a relationship. Yeah. And it's really the job seeker or the student's responsibility to cultivate that over time. So we have found there are 4 things that the student or job seeker should do after they have this informal career conversation. Of course, an email within 24 hours should be sent expressing gratitude. That's a no-brainer. Unfortunately, not every college student does that, but that should be a no-brainer.
Not every adult does it either, by the way.
Yeah.
That's a different conversation.
Second would be a handwritten thank you note on top of the thank you email. And, and sometimes students are concerned about, well, do I say the same thing? If no, you alter it slightly, but it's not going to be a long-winded email, and it's not going to be a long-winded thank you note. But employers know how much effort goes into writing an email, and employers know that there's more effort that goes into a handwritten thank you note, especially for Gen Z, right? A lot of Gen Zs, they don't have a thank you note at home. They don't have stamps at home. So they have to probably go to the grocery store and buy a thank you note and buy a stamp and envelope maybe, and then handwrite the email, handwrite the note and put it in the mail, and it's amazing. Like some people might think, oh, that's old school. I just had a student apply for, who went through the programming, wanted to get a job with Adidas, international student, going to college in the United States from Japan, want to get a job with Adidas in Japan. 2,000 applicants for 2 positions in this certain department at Adidas. And she made the final 8. And during the final interviews, or after one of her final interviews, she contacted me, and she said, hey, I think the people are still working from home from what I can see on the video chat. So I don't think it makes sense. It's not worth, sending the thank you note because 1, they're working from home and I don't know their home address. And number 2 is like my letter's got to go across the ocean. I don't think it's going to get there in time by the time they make their decision. And so I convinced her, Yuho, that it would be a good idea to do it, because even if she doesn't get the position, that at some point the person is going to go in the office, get the note, and they're going to think very favorably of her, and maybe it will help her get another position down the line. Long story short, she sends the thank you email in the mail. The person does get it before the decision gets made. She gets one of the 2 positions. During her onboarding, they specifically called out and said, Yuho, it was a really tough decision by the final 8. And there was virtually everyone had a very similar application at that point. Everyone had interviewed well. We liked all 8. The reason you got one of the 2 spots is because you took the time to handwrite a thank you email and send it during the pandemic, knowing that we may or may not have gotten it. And so please, everyone out there, even if you have doubts, send a handwritten thank you note.
Notice, folks, what she did, and what Sean is talking about is things that you can do to differentiate yourself from the competition. Because if you're just like everyone else, how do they choose? And
Exactly.
that's true when you become more experienced as well, because everyone is qualified when you become more experienced. They know how to read a resume. They can see the basics of what you've done. The interview is about confirming it and trying to get a feel for you as a human being. And everyone says the same things. I, I can do this. I can do that. I have done this. I have done that. And what makes you stand out? It becomes little things that become the tiebreakers that include I'm really interested in this opportunity. I'm looking forward to hearing from you, expressing your interest in the role. Because on their side, one of the things they're terrified of, you invest all this time and all this effort and get the approvals, and then you make the offer and it gets turned down. So giving them something that says, I'm interested, works beautifully for folks. Now, Sean, what else should we cover today? Because we've already been on for a half hour, if you can believe it, and you're doing great. What else should we cover in the time that we have?
I can share a story of a student who implemented the method and the follow-up, and it landed to an internship with Google.
Excellent. Let's do that. So how did she do it? What did she do? Or what did he do it? You didn't mention gender.
So Lydia was going into her senior year, first generation college student, and had a job offer from one of the big four accounting firms, PricewaterhouseCoopers. And she signed, and she made more money in her first year than her parents combined. And she had this job offer before she showed up to day one of her senior year. She could have just coasted during her senior year and just not pressed herself. But she said to her, after going through the career launch curriculum, she thought it would be really cool to finish her college, or her time in college with an internship at Google. So as she's going through the career launch method, one of the companies that she put on her top 10 list during step one was Google. And on her top 25 list of strategic contacts was the co-founder of Google X. His name is Tom Chi. And so she gets to, she has an email signature, step 3 in the LinkedIn profile. Step 4, on day 1, she sends the email template that we suggest in the book. And she gets a response from Tom Chi, the co-founder of Google X, after the very first email. That does not always happen. Usually it's the second email, and sometimes you got to make the phone call, because some professionals will never say yes to an email. They want to see that the student has the tenacity and the courage to make a phone call. But Lydia got a yes from the first email to the co-founder of Google X. He says, Lydia, I understand that you're about 45 minutes to an hour away. So if you want to do a video chat, that's fine. This is pre-pandemic. She says, no, actually, my professor requires us to do these in person. And so I'll take the train and I'll come up to San Francisco. So she does. She does all the preparation in step 5 and step 6. She has a highly effective career conversation. At the end, she tries to use that 4-question sequence to inquire about an internship, and she does. And at the end of it, she says, well, what would be next steps? She said, unfortunately, don't have anything right now, but you can feel free to follow up. And so she says thanks, and she leaves. She takes the train back to her college, and she sends the thank you email the next morning. She puts a handwritten thank you note in the mail. And then a month later, she calls to check in. And actually, she made a call, not an email check-in. He had offered, and given her permission to call. I think he gave a business card at the time. And so she had the phone number, and she said, hey, Tom, it was really great to meet you last month. You had mentioned that, to check in with you from time to time. Is there anything available? He said, and by the way, Tom had left Google and had some investments in some startups. He said, one of the companies that I've invested in needs to build out an accounting system. I think you'd be a great fit for it. Would you like to come on board as a paid intern? You'd quasi-report to the entrepreneur and quasi-report to me.
Wow.
Of course, she said yes. I mean, can you imagine, Jeff, what it was like for Lydia on her, her next call to her parents, who are already thrilled that she got a job with a top 4 accounting firm, to now say that she got a paid internship reporting to the co-founder of Google X.
Unreal. It's a gorgeous story that really illustrates a lot of the things that I have to say experienced professionals can do as well.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
these techniques, and I've gone through the book, so I can state with certainty, these techniques work no matter where you are professionally.
Yep.
It's just about reaching out to people to begin a relationship and maintaining the relationship over the course of time so that they learn to know, like, trust, and respect you. For students, it's know, like, and trust. I don't think there's a way that you can get respected at the student level. I think that they're just going to like you and they're going to want to give you a chance. But for you veteran people, having these career conversations with folks regularly, not just when you're looking for something, regularly, it's the way to do it. Because what's the statistic on probabilities of getting hired if you're introduced by someone versus applying for a job cold? Is it 12 times more likely?
12x, yep.
12 times more likely to be hired if you're introduced by someone versus if you're doing it cold. Yeah, you got to do it, folks. Sean, this is fabulous. How can people get a copy of, here it comes, the book, the workbook, anything else? How can they find out more about you, the book, and everything?
Yeah, thanks so much, Jeff. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, every major retailer, you can find the book. Anyone in higher education out there, or nonprofits or government agencies that serve students, you could go to www.careerlaunch.academy, not .com, .academy, careerlaunch.academy, and learn more about our co-curricular services, micro-learning programs, certifications, and the assessment. We have a 40-question assessment that looks at the 5 main competencies that are needed to excel in creating relationships from scratch and accessing the hidden job market. So you could go to careerlaunchassessment.com and purchase a copy of the assessment. It's included for free in the book, but if you'd just like to take the assessment, you go to careerlaunchassessment.com to pick up or utilize a copy or access the assessment.
Folks, get the book. And if you watch me or listen to me, I don't say that very often. Just get the book. It makes it a lot easier for you. Sean, thank you. And folks, we'll be back soon with more. I'm Jeff Altman, the Big Game Hunter. Hope you enjoyed today's interview. If you did and you're watching on YouTube, click the like button, share it, let someone know it was worthwhile. It'll help them. You'll feel good about yourself. I also want to say, connect with me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/IN/the Big Game Hunter. Again, mention that you saw the interview or listened to the interview. I like knowing I'm helping some folks. And once we're connected, your network is going to grow a heck of a lot because mine tends to be a lot larger than most people's. Also want to say at my website, which is thebiggamehunter.us, you can schedule time for a free discovery call, schedule time for coaching, go to the blog where I've got thousands of posts that you can watch, listen to, or read that will help you land your role no matter where you are in your job search, career, etc. Hope you have a terrific day, and most importantly, be great. Take care.